This is Money Made Simple, the financial podcast that keeps it simple and gets to the point.
Welcome back to all those who have been tuning into our first few episodes. It's great to have you. Liv here, and today on the show we're going to be segueing a little bit away from these simple financial concepts that we've been discussing, because I have a very special guest joining me, one whom many of you may already know. Sam Stubbs, our MD and co-founder of Simplicity. Sam, welcome.
Hey Liv, hi.
So today we are going to be chatting about simplicity living, but it would be great if you can just give us a super quick rundown on your background, kind of prior to Simplicity, just for a bit of context.
Yeah, sure. So really quickly, West Auckland boy, mum and dad were school teachers, which was fantastic, great moral compass and values, had a successful career in finance around the world, sort of stared into a mirror in my mid-40s, had a midlife crisis and said I should be looking after the people from where I come from, and so decided then to basically change my career and get into give back mode.
Cool. And leading from that, can you tell me a little bit more how and why you ended up starting a KiwiSaver scheme in New Zealand?
Yeah, so if you want to make a difference, I think a really natural place is go where you know the most, right? Where you can be the most effective. So I've been in the finance industry for a long time, been in funds management, and I sort of knew where the bodies were buried in our industry. I knew that it was an incredibly profitable industry that was ripe to be disrupted. So I said, just let's go there.
And by bodies being buried, I assume you're speaking figuratively?
Yeah, of course. Yes. I don't think fund managers are in the business of murder.
Good. Neither. We're clear on that. Do you think that it has disrupted the industry like you hope it would 7 years ago around your kitchen table?
Yeah, look, I think it has in several ways. I mean, if you look at the fees, they're starting to come down now, competitive tension. I think we disrupted it in terms of it being a lot more online now. It used to be very manual. Now it's a very online and quick process. So yeah, and I think in the investment side now, what you'll start to see with things like build-to-rent housing, providing mortgages, getting involved in high-growth startups, all of those sort of things, we're beginning to see our competitors following us into those areas, and that's great.
And that's what you started out to do, right? Cool. So you've been running Simplicity for almost 7 years now, right?
Yep.
But what we really want to get into today is around simplicity living. And I think that just for the sake of being super clear for our listeners, it's probably best if we just get you to start with the super boring stuff, aka a description of exactly how Simplicity's investment in simplicity living works, kind of from a member or investor's perspective. Can you give us a bit of a technical explanation around this?
Yeah, because this is like super important, because it's members' money, so they need to know exactly how it's invested and what's invested in. So basically, it's not like we take our KiwiSaver money and we go and build houses. What we are doing is when you invest into our funds and when those funds invest into build-to-rent housing, what they're doing is they're investing in a wholesale fund called a property fund. It's called the Simplicity Property Fund. And what that fund does, it just holds one asset, and that's 100% of the shares in Simplicity Living. And it's Simplicity Living, which is a for-profit company which goes out there, buys the land, develops the houses, owns and operates it. And when those houses generate money, it could be rent, it could be capital appreciation, and sometimes when they might lose money because the value of the houses might go down, the value of the Simplicity Living shares goes up and down, and that means the property fund, which owns 100% of those, its value goes up and down, and that affects the KiwiSaver funds or the investment funds who may be invested in that. So that's what you're investing in. You're investing in units of our wholesale property fund, and that owns 100% of Simplicity Living. And so you aren't owning these investments directly. You're invested in a fund which owns the company which owns those assets directly.
Okay. So it's like a chain of ownership.
Well, yeah, one invests in the other. And I think it's important, when we're talking about this, is that I'm a director of Simplicity Living and Simplicity the Investment Manager, right? So when I'm talking about we're developing and renting the units or whatever, what I'm talking about usually is how Simplicity Living is running its business. I've got my Simplicity Living director hat on. Remember, this is a for-profit company, right? So we are in the business of making investors the most amount of money they can out of this asset class.
So you mean in terms of for-profit company, you mean Simplicity Living are
Exactly. So Simplicity Living makes money. It is designed to make investors money because it's their money investing into it. Simplicity New Zealand Limited, which is the fund manager, that is a non-profit company. But when we're investing members' money, it's like every dollar of investors' money we manage is designed to generate long-term returns for the members. And that's the case with shares in Simplicity Living as well. And that means, of course, that there's risk there as well, right? the properties could go
course.
down in value as well as up in value and so on.
Like we've seen recently.
Exactly.
Me with my property investment hat on, I
Right.
would know that very, very well. Okay, awesome. So now that we've got that important stuff out the way, we can kind of unleash the passion that we here at Simplicity and Simplicity Living all know you very best for, Sam.
Yeah.
Can you just go over how you came to partner with Simplicity Living?
Yeah, sure. So, Stephen Tyndall, right? He's a
course.
patron of our charity. I'm a massive fan of his, and he's been a great friend of ours. I went to him and said, look, we have all this investment capital, right? We have billions of dollars. There's this big problem out there called housing, and it seems to be very profitable if you get it right, the business model right. So, I'm looking at options to invest a lot of money long term in helping increase New Zealand's housing supply and make good money for our members, because the great thing about houses is sometimes they go down in value like they just have, but usually they're a pretty reliable asset class, right? And the tax system advantages and so on. And so he said, bingo, light bulb moment. He said, you got to meet this guy called Shane, because he's capable of building houses in volume and scale. And look, I was just an idiot, man. I missed the first 2 appointments because I got the wrong address and all this sort of thing. And I finally get the third one. I got a pretty salty response, but within 5 minutes, it was just a bromance. Shane and Anna, who'd built NZ Living, were in a give back mentality, but they wanted to use their skills to apply in scale to make the biggest difference for New Zealanders, which is exactly why we set up Simplicity, right? Use our skills in scale to make the biggest difference. And we worked out that with their construction ability to build and our ability to finance it via our members investing in a property fund and then owning Simplicity Living, here is an opportunity for us to build in scale to a very, very good price and really high quality. Because in the building game, they usually say you can either have cheap, fast or good. You have 2 out of 3, but you can't have all 3. Well, actually, this is all 3.
We had to prove it wrong.
Yeah. Well, and we will. So that was a match made in heaven. After that, things went really quickly. When we worked out that the values were aligned, the skills were a really good match, the hearts were in the right place, and the capacity to do it was there. There's an ocean of good intentions in housing, but there aren't many people who can build quality houses to a price. So it all happened. Millions of documents and lawyers and processes and all that sort of thing after that, but you've got to get the basics right. So that's how it happened. So effectively what Shane and Anna have done is gifted all their IP and all of the capability of the business over to Simplicity Living, and now that operates as a for-profit company, and it has this 100% owner in the Simplicity Property Fund.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So you talk about the investments that Simplicity's property fund makes in Simplicity Living as giving Simplicity an enduring competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Can you just explain in general terms what you mean in general about an enduring competitive advantage?
Yeah, sure. So you could call it enduring, you could call it unnatural, you could call it a competitive advantage. This is what is the competitive advantage of our business because of the way we run it. And there are several, but here's the really big one. The big one is that time is our friend. And what we mean by that is if Simplicity, the fund manager, was a for-profit company, we would usually have shareholders that we have to reward, and we would do that by, charging the highest fees that we can get away with so that shareholders make money in the fund manager. Or we would have to make short-term decisions because we're getting paid, bonuses or whatever. We don't have any of that in Simplicity New Zealand. We're a non-profit company. That means that we don't have shareholders to feed. That means we can take very long-term view, and that's why I say time is our friend. We will never make any profit as a fund manager. That means we'll never be worth anything. That means we'll never be bought or sold, right? So it means we can think 100 years in the future if we want to. So that is a competitive advantage, a long-term perspective. The other competitive advantage, of course, is we don't need to make money for our shareholders, which means that we can pass on the benefits of scale through to our members. So those are really enduring competitive advantages, right?
So you've kind of just touched on Simplicity as a non-profit, but as you said, Simplicity Living are a for-profit company, even though they're owned 100% by the property fund, so the profit goes back to the members. Can you kind of explain the enduring competitive advantage that Simplicity Living has?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I just used 2 words. It's called vertical integration, and what that means is that we basically, this is Simplicity Living. We buy the land, we do the master planning for the land, we build the buildings, we own them, we then run them, we get the tenants in, and so on and so forth. So we control every aspect of that phase. Sometimes we'll use some contractors to help us build, and sometimes we'll contract different parties in, but we own and control the whole process. And that means that we get all the benefits of scale, and there are inherent economic advantages there. It also means that we have control, and it means also that the people who are investing in the property fund, which owns Simplicity Living, they benefit because no one's making any profit in between, right? Yeah, there's the odd subcontractor that's a for-profit business, but basically I call it getting rid of the phyllo pastry of fees, right? Because we know what it costs us to build a 2-bedroom apartment, for example, versus what the average market cost is. It depends on the building and the site and so on, but it's in the order of overall, on average, about a 30% cheaper build
than the average.
And
right.
that's really significant, right? Because the benefits of that, bearing in mind that, of course, the property is still valued the same as something that costs 30% more, so the benefit of that goes through to members in terms of enhanced returns. We call that a revaluation gain when the property is finished. But it also means that we then have the flexibility to build a really high quality building because we've got wiggle room, right? The building code in New Zealand says you have to build a new house to last 50 years. Don't know if people know that, but that is the building code. We build it to at least double that. We build out of concrete and brick and so on. Now, because we're so efficient in the way we do that, it's actually cheaper than building a house that lasts 50 years, but also the materials are much more enduring. So when you have those sort of enduring competitive advantages and the output is a property which costs less, that is of huge benefit to our investors in the property fund that owns Simplicity Living. So it's a real win-win here. And that's why we're so enthusiastic about it.
So you talk about these investments giving us an advantage, but obviously we've had some naysayers talk about how we started out with our passive index investments that we were originally known for. And so why do you personally believe that it's better to go into these other investments like our private equity and shares in Simplicity Living versus sticking to that passive index investing?
Yeah. Well, look, over 90% of our money stays invested passively, right? So that we're only talking about 10%, and that's only where we have that enduring competitive advantage, right? If it's in Simplicity Living, for example, it's because of the things we've just talked about. If it was in private equity and venture capital, it's because of the patience, the money we have, the investment perspective we can take over long term, and the advantage we get as an investor by virtue of being a non-profit and a big player in town, a KiwiSaver default provider. So where we have a competitive advantage, we'll do that. But I'd say this also, Liv, is a lot of people confuse active and passive because, for example, our sort of long-term aim is to own and rent 10,000 homes across New Zealand as part of Simplicity Living. Once you've done that, that's a very passive investment. So what we've actively decided to get involved in this, our aim is to have a very long-term passive holding of companies. Likewise in private equity and venture capital. If you own a lot of them and you own them over the long term and you're not getting involved too much in the running of them, you basically have a passive portfolio. So people confuse active versus passive because the only passive available asset classes are like in shares and bonds and so on. But if you can find another asset class, another investment class like build-to-rent housing or private equity and venture capital, it's perfectly possible to be a passive long-term investor in those things, even though each individual purchasing decision is an active one. So we're building up actually a passive portfolio. So ultimately, what we're aiming for is to have a more passive portfolio across more asset classes
so more
than people traditionally, even more diversified. And in each one of those areas, where we have an enduring competitive advantage, we are taking advantage of that competitive position for the benefit of our members. This is all about making our members wealthier over the long term. So I'd throw that back at those people and say, you call that being active. I say, we're going to be more passive than the passive players long term. Now, that's my personal opinion. I know people have different, views about what constitutes active and passive.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think that's a really interesting point around that 90% still passively invested and with that 10% where we have that competitive advantage. Okay, cool. So back to Simplicity Living.
Yeah.
You and Shane from Simplicity Living have some pretty big ambitions or vision for it.
Yeah.
Do you think that it could provide a fix for what some describe as New Zealand's housing crisis, where we just don't have enough houses for our team of 5 million?
Yeah, look, it won't fix the problem, but it will help. Our housing problem is fundamentally one of demand and supply. There is more demand, there is not enough supply.
And it's decades old, right?
It's 3 decades old, actually, 3 decades in the making. And so what we are trying to do here with Simplicity Living is, first and foremost, make a great return for our members. And the doing good bit, because you can make money and do good. Simplicity is here to show that in action. The doing good bit is you're increasing housing supply in scale. We want to build thousands and thousands of these all around the country so that we get an increase in housing supply. Now, from that's how you help fix the housing. You can't fix it.
Too many problems within it,
well,
right?
Well, it's a massive, massive problem.
Yeah.
But there's no one that we can see out there with KiwiSaver money and investment members' money actually coming up with a scalable, deliverable, and most importantly, profitable solution to increasing housing supply in New Zealand. So, listen, Liv, we're doing this because we can see that there is an opportunity to make our members really good returns over the long term. And remember that, with housing, people have traditionally considered that to be a great investment in New Zealand. And a lot of people choose between term deposits or investment properties or whatever, right? We think this will be another alternative for those people.
So from your Simplicity Living point of view, you're Director of Simplicity Living here, what are some of the goals over the, say, coming decade, and where are we at? Is Simplicity Living at the moment?
Yeah. So look, we're moving ahead pretty rapidly, right? So in 2 years, we have completed and rented 159 homes. By the end of this year, we will have 345 in build. And then we have got the land either purchased or close to being purchased for around about another 800 homes. Our long-term ambition is to have 10,000 homes around the country and create what we call like a new option for New Zealanders, which is to rent for the rest of your life. It's something that's very common overseas.
So it's not a new concept,
right? No, there's nothing new. It just new to New Zealand, right? So 42% of people in the OECD live in an apartment. A huge number of those are rented long-term, and many of them owned by pension funds. We're just doing what is very common in Europe, America, even in Australia. I don't like doing new things with our members' money.
No, that's one thing I love about Simplicity.
We just want to do something which we know has worked overseas, bring it to New Zealand, and do it in a vertically integrated and scaled way. So 10,000 homes is a lot, and of course that's going to take many years for us to do. But the company which can build a lot of homes very cost efficiently to a very high quality, that is a fantastic investment, right? Let's forget about all the social good this does. Just think about it as an investment. That is something on behalf of our members we absolutely want them to have an option to be invested in, right?
So hopefully that provides a good background in the basics of how Simplicity Living works and how Simplicity funds are involved with Simplicity Living. We'll go into some more cool detail in future episodes and hopefully get some of the Simplicity Living team on the show to share some of their stories. Thanks so much, Sam, for joining us, and we look forward to hopefully having you back soon.
Yeah, thanks, Liv.
So next week's episode is on KiwiSaver contributions, how they work, and what a difference they can make to your balance at retirement. Look forward to chatting next week. This podcast contains personal opinions and is intended to provide educational information only. It doesn't relate to your particular financial situation or goals and is not financial advice or recommendations. Simplicity New Zealand Limited is the issuer of the Simplicity KiwiSaver scheme and investment funds. For product disclosure statements, please visit Simplicity's website, simplicity.kiwi.